The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Fantasy. Get up to 1K in a positive match with Mark Fantasy with the promo code SGPN. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is currently Wednesday morning, early Wednesday morning, around 1 a.m. Eastern Time on August 6th. I'm your host, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Time to get into the semifinals taking place on Wednesday in Toronto. It's going to break down the matchups between Zverev and Khachanov, as well as the matchup between Fritz and Shelton. So before we get into any of the actual recap of the quarters and the preview for the semifinal matchups, a reminder, you support the show by liking and subscribing on YouTube, and the podcast is also available on Spotify and Apple. So once again, you can leave a like and subscribe on YouTube. You can check out the podcast on Spotify or Apple and leave a rating and a review when you do check it out, audio format only on those two platforms. Plus, a reminder, check out the actual merch store on the SGPN website. We have a lot of great tennis merch. We have sweatshirts, we have t-shirts, we have mugs. We also have this nice helmet if you want to get something for SGPN as a whole. So once again, check out the merch store. Think you'll find stuff that you like for a bunch of different shows, not just for the tennis show, but for the baseball show, for example, for the regular SGP, for college experience, you name it. Point is, we have a bunch of content. Check out the merch store. Plus, a reminder that you can also check out the NFL team previews that we have with Sports Camp Podcast, because they're back with the 32 NFL team previews. They're also bringing back the phrase that pays. Each episode, they'll give it a word of a 32-word phrase, submit the entire phrase for a chance to win a $1,000 circa future. So, starting off with the actual recap of what happened in the quarters. Unfortunately, not a good episode for us as we went 0-2 for the lock and dog. For the lock, we had de Minaur team total over 12.5 at -150, and he lost in straight sets. There's really only one outcome. I know in theory, de Minaur winning in straight sets handily would have also lost this, but it wasn't realistic with Shelton serving. So based on that, there was really only one outcome that we had, which was de Minaur losing in straight sets, and he did. Shelton took care of business, and de Minaur lost. So picked up a loss there for the lock. For the dog, ended up losing with Fritz and Rublev first set over 10.5 games at +150. Still love the price, just didn't get there as Rublev lost. I think it was the first 8 or 10 points of the match. Immediate break by Fritz. Then both guys held for the next hour or so. Fritz won in straight sets, but either way, a point. His second set went to a breaker. First set did not, and we lost the +150 because Rublev just no-showed the first 5 minutes of the match, give or take. So pick up a loss there for the dog. So either way, we'll look to bounce back for the semis taking place on Wednesday. Now, for the comment section, by the way, see people stopping by. I see Terry stopping by as once again. So nice to see you, Terry. See John stopping by. I see Wipeout stopping by too. You want some leans on WTA stuff? Truth is, I haven't really looked through it, but if I remember, I'll mention some stuff over the course of the episode. So either way, starting off with the recap of the quarters, you had only one match that went to 3 sets, as you saw Zverev drop the first set, then win the next 2 against defending champion Papirin, as he ended up winning in 3. He could have won the first set, kind of fumbled it. You saw Papirin get the net cord on the half volley to end up winning the set. But either way, Zverev bounced back, won the next 2 sets comfortably, as he eventually did win in 3. Khachanov beat Mickelson in straight sets, 6-4, 7-6. And it felt like both players really didn't look that great. But either way, Khachanov was better. Mickelson just, I thought, was disastrous with his return games, especially over the course of the second set. He had a bunch of chances. It felt that way to get into games. Unforced errors were his undoing. He had a low 40. Both guys did, actually, late in the second set. Neither guy converted, and Khachanov kind of ran away with the tiebreak as he won 7-3. But nice win there for Khachanov. Good win for us. We still have Khachanov to win the event at 30-1. So we have some action entering the semis. We'll see what happens. Hopefully Khachanov finds a way at 30-1 to finish the job off, but we'll see what happens. For the matchups that took place on Tuesday, overall, not really that much drama. You ended up seeing Fritz beat Rublev in straight sets. The only drama was Fritz serving for the match and choking at the end of the second set, but he won the breaker anyway, so it didn't really matter. And then Shelton dominated de Minaur as he won 6-3, 6-4. So nothing else to really add for the matches on Tuesday. Not much drama. Fritz is a better player than Rublev. Rublev's return games were a mess for most of the way through. Fritz was serving very well, though, I'll admit it, but I thought Rublev really just never had opportunities to break. And the one time he did, Fritz kind of broke himself. Double faulted a couple of times, had himself opportunities to get out of the game and to win the match. Just couldn't do it. But Rublev got handed a break, basically, on a platter. Besides that, Fritz served well. Rublev also served pretty well, with the exception of one service game early in the first set. and one service game late in the second set. Besides that, felt like Fritz's serve was just better, and he was able to win. Nothing else to add. Dimmenauer, I know he did us a solid as we ended up backing him to win in DC. Still, the serve is just not good enough, and that's why he's always going to have a certain limit to his ceiling. Or I should say a certain, once again, a limit to his upside. And it was on full display against Shelton. He won 66% of his first serve points, not going to get it done against Shelton. And Shelton, by comparison, won 78% of his first serve points. But Dimmenauer had chances to make the match competitive, couldn't do it. He went down a break early in the second set, got the break back, then immediately got broken again. And that was really the story of the match. So Dimmenauer just didn't have enough serving, I'd say, skills to get the job done against Shelton. And Shelton did return pretty well for his standards en route to a straight set win. But once again, not too much drama. You had 1-3 setter. Every other match ended in straight sets. Basically it, so we'll see what happens. I see a comment here that he has Kashanov and Fritz and the halves to face off in the final at 6-6-1. So good luck to you. Hopefully that works out. You are officially 2 matches away, 1 day away. I'm rooting for you. We'll see what happens. I see a couple other people stopping by. I see AO stopping by. Hopefully AO did cash the WNBA plays that we had. Terrell and I crushed it. We won everything on the podcast. We swept the lock and dogs with the underdog entry. So I know that he's a pretty common, I'd say, listener to the NBA pods. So hopefully he did a good job, I should say, with the WNBA slate, and hopefully you tailed some of the plays that we had for that show. I see Wipeout mentioning, though, for WTA. I'll actually get into it now because why not? Says if Rybakina does win 2-0, he's curious what I think about Towson, etc. Towson did a great job against Swiatek as she was able to win comfortably. Nice Cinderella run by Muboku, so we'll see what happens there. Rybakina, we know, can be had when she is a decent favorite. She can choke in big spots. It wouldn't shock me if Rybakina ended up potentially having a bit of a letdown in the second set, maybe on the cusp of winning, and you ended up seeing a Cinderella run go into a third set and beyond. Osaka and Towson, I think, is interesting. Osaka's been really good. She's only dropped 1 set. You could argue competition has been up and down. Beating Svitolina, though, was nice. Beating Ostapenko was nice in straight sets. I mean, Sevastova, though, in the round of 16 is an absolute joke. That was basically a bye and a half. So nice job by Osaka, though. Dominate. Towson, though, has not dropped a set yet. Beat Keys, beat Swiatek. She had a couple of easy opponents in the first couple rounds. Faced off 1 time in the past. It was actually this year. And you saw Osaka get injured, and she had to retire after a set. I think Osaka is playing great tennis. I don't mind the over, but I don't really see much of an angle on the side personally. I think it's a good spot to potentially go for an over, pick a 3-setter, because both players are looking very sharp. Both players, I know it's women's tennis, so grain of salt. They can serve pretty well, so we'll see what happens. But either way, I think that Towson and Osaka should have a fun battle. For the other matchups there on the women's side, they have no head-to-head meetings between Rybakina. Actually, they faced off 1 time, faced off in DC this year, and Rybakina ended up winning in straight sets. There was a 7-5 in that one. I don't mind the team total over for Rybakina. I think either she wins a close matchup or potentially goes 3. And then at that point, with Rybakina and her history of choking, it might go off the rails. I don't mind the team total over for Rybakina. I think that matchup should be close, but I do think that she's the better player. We'll see what happens for that one. Anyway, before we get into any of the previews for the 2 matchups in the semis on the men's side for Toronto, a reminder they're brought to you by our sponsor, which is Underdog Fantasy. Because they're doing Bestmania happening all summer long, giving away 15 million prizes. They have 2 men in first place. No waiver wire, no trade arguments. Best way to play fantasy football. And a reminder, you'd also use pick'em entries with Underdog. So if you tailed the Underdog entry that we had on the WNBA show with Terrell, 9x, and we ended up winning. So hopefully you tailed us there. But a reminder, you can win up to 500 times your entry. Sign up, though, with the code SGPN. You got a special pick and first time with an offer up to 1K and bonus cash. Our fancy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by MyBookie. They're available on a ton of locations. Use them to bet on baseball, tennis, WNBA, golf, and of course football futures for college football and for the NFL. A reminder, you can use them in a ton of locations. Use crypto to bet with them for easy deposits and fast payouts. When you sign up, though, for an account, use code SGPN. You get 100% of the match up to 1K. Terms and conditions upon the G promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Cam Podcast. Finished recapping the quarters. Time to move on into the semis taking place in Toronto. Starting off with the first matchup on the card, you have Zverev taking on Kashanov. First matchup taking place at 7 p.m. Eastern. So no day tennis. You have some qualifying stuff going on in Cincinnati. Besides that, though, you have the men's matches for the semis starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. So for this one, you have Zverev at minus 250, Khachanov at plus 195. For the spread, minus 2.5 for Zverev, plus 2.5 for Khachanov. Juice, though, is on the 2.5 for Zverev at minus 137. The over-under is at 23.5. Zverev in straight sets is around plus 110. The over 2.5 sets is plus 130. For team totals, you have Zverev at around 13 or 13.5. 13.5 is plus 130 on the over. Khachanov, though, is around 12 or 11.5. 11.5, the over is minus 143. The under is plus 108. So for the head-to-head, Zverev has kind of owned him, historically speaking, as Zverev is currently 5-2 lifetime against Khachanov. Faced off a couple of times over the last year. Faced off in Cincinnati last year and Miami last year, and Zverev won both those in straight sets. Faced off in the Olympics 2021, and Zverev did win in straight sets as well. Point is, though, they've only faced off 2 times within the last 4 years, so any head-to-head stuff beyond that might be pushing it. But Zverev is 5-2 lifetime, so there you go. Faced off, though, in Montreal 1 time, so not Toronto, but still Canada, 2019, and Khachanov won in straight sets. That was 6 years ago. Do I care? Not really. So once again, the recent meetings, the meetings from last year, were very lopsided, not just based on straight set wins, but Khachanov not winning more than 4 games in a single set. So it was very lopsided both times. We'll see if Zverev can keep it rolling, or if Khachanov, our boy, can get into the final and make the plus 3,000 long shot 1 match away from cashing. Now, for the path of both players, Zverev has had a pretty decent run. He's dropped some sets, though. Beat Walton in straight sets, including a breaker in the second set. Ended up beating Arnaldi in 3. Ended up beating Cerundolo in a set and a retirement, and beat Papirin in 3 sets. Could have been straight sets. Did kind of punt away the first set. He had a chance there in the breaker. But either way, he did eventually bounce back and win the next 2 sets, so it didn't matter. Khachanov, though, has been good. Beat Mickelson, beat Ruud in straight sets, both of them. And they're beating Nava in 3, and beat Fikovic in the first round in straight sets. Now, Fikovic did lose in qualifying handily in Cincinnati, I believe, to Royer. So, with that being said, Khachanov hasn't beaten anybody worth a damn in the entire tournament. Now, that's why we picked him to win the event. We thought his draw was a joke. It's why we thought that him to win the quarter was a good price, and why we thought that he would have a decent chance of making a good run. However, Zverev is by far the best player that he's faced. I know Ruud is a borderline top 10 guy. Come back from injury, though. We know he's at his best on clay. It was competitive. Khachanov, though, was the better player, and he was favored in the matchup. So Ruud's his best opponent so far, but there was a little asterisk there because he hasn't played much with the injuries he's been dealing with since the clay season. So with that being said, he beat Mickelson, who I've said many times on the show, I don't think he's very good. Simply put, I know he made the final in Winston-Salem, did lose to Sonego. I don't think that Mickelson's a great player by any means. I think he's pretty average, and I do think that he's a guy who can get by against easy draws, but he's really the kind of guy you'd want to be facing in the quarterfinals, and Khachanov beat him in straight sets. Both guys, though, I thought really didn't look that great. I thought Khachanov was just a little bit better, and Mickelson's shot selection was atrocious, especially in the big moments and in the tiebreaker. So, once again, his best opponent's been Ruud, basically, but that's basically it. He hasn't beaten anybody. Nava's been okay recently. He's not a great player. Fikovic is not any good on hard court, and he beat Mickelson. So, once again, nice job, but I feel like it's a massive step of competition, and that's why I'm kind of skeptical of Khachanov raising his level to beat Zverev. Now, Zverev has been dropping sets, but Cerundolo can be dangerous. Papirin's defending champion at the event here. Even Arnaldi can be dangerous on hard court. So you're looking at what I think is the better player who's favored, and he's been good in the head-to-head, being 5-2. I think 250 might be cheap, actually. I think that Zverev should be around 300 for this one. Khachanov, just watching the match unfolding as Mickelson, just didn't impress me. I thought it was 2 guys who looked like they were relatively fortunate based on the draws they had to make it into the quarters. And yes, Khachanov can be dangerous at times on hard court. And yes, he can make some noise at 1,000 events, but Zverev is the better player. Now, I do think that Zverev's a choker, and you can see Zverev maybe punt a set. It wouldn't shock me if Zverev ended up having a mental lapse, ended up potentially getting broken. But Khachanov second serve's not great either. So if Zverev's going to be standing far back with his return position, Khachanov never comes forward. So Zverev's going to be able to get into the long rallies, and Khachanov not going to stop him from doing it. If Zverev's going to be simply put just lollipopping forehands and backhands into play, and Khachanov never going to come to the net, that's going to benefit Zverev. I just think Zverev's a guy who should be able, matchup wise, to kind of dominate. And I think that based on head-to success, it's not fluky. Faced off 2 times last year, Khachanov won less than 5 games in all 4 sets. I see it being pretty straightforward. I think Zverev's going to win. I think he'll win comfortably. I hope I'm wrong, because Khachanov winning would be great for a long shot, but I do think that Zverev's worthy of being a bigger favorite. Khachanov's beaten nobody in the entire event. Zverev's a good returner. We know Khachanov's not a good returner, and Khachanov's a guy who, like Papirin, can't hit a ton of errors. And if the script is there for Zverev to simply put, not beat himself and dare Khachanov to beat him, I have my doubts. Now, we saw, even with that being the case, Papirin won a set because Zverev kind of punted the breaker away, if we're being honest. But I do think that Khachanov is the inferior player who had a much better draw, and because of that, I think Zverev should win. So give me Zverev in straight sets. I like the plus money at around plus 112. I don't mind the spread at 2.5. The over-under, I would consider the under in this one. But last year's meetings, the only 2 recent meetings, once again, because every other meeting was from 2021 or earlier, I think it's a bad matchup for Khachanov. So give me Zverev in this one. I think that even though his play style can be quite boring, and it feels like Zverev's kind of models entire game after Andy Murray, I don't mean that in a good way. I know Murray was a very good player, but it feels like Zverev's become even more conservative and more passive than we wanted him to be. And yet, at the same point, he's still winning. So based on that, give me Zverev in straight sets. I think he wins, simply put. I hope I'm wrong for the outright, but I think that he's the better player. Give me Zverev for the value, minus 2.5, or with the spread on these sets. Moving on to the next matchup. You have the Americans going at it. You have Shelton against Fritz. Now, Fritz is around minus 165. I see Shelton around plus 130 for the spread. I see minus 1.5 games for Fritz, plus 1.5 for Shelton. The over-under is around 25.5 games. For team totals, I see Shelton at 12.5. The over is minus 136. The under is plus 102. For Fritz, I see 13.5. The over is plus 110. The under is minus 150. So, based on the head-to-head history, faced off 1 time on hard court, it was in Indian Wells, and Fritz did win in 3. Now, Indian Wells does play pretty slow compared to other hard court events. It was 2 years ago, and Fritz did win in 3. Now, we know Shelton's gotten a lot better over the last 2 years. Fritz has gotten better too, but Fritz was the more, I'd say, polished player during that meeting, and yet Shelton still went to 3 sets. Did lose. It is in Fritz's backyard in California, but either way, the match was close. Eventually, Fritz did win. So the path of both players so far, they look very good. Now, Fritz's serve has been very, very dangerous, but we do know that he survived the scare as he ended up going to a final set breaker against Leheshka, and there were no breaks in the entire matchup. Beat Rublev in straight sets, beat Leheshka in 3, beat Diallo in straight sets, and beat Baena in a randomly competitive straight set matchup. Now, for Shelton, he's been good too. Did end up beating Dimonauer in straight sets, did drop a set to Kaboli, did drop a set to Nakashima. He was also fighting off Kaboli while he was serving for the match. So Shelton ended up being pushed to the brink, and he survived and was able to win, beat Nakashima in a breaker in the final set as well, and beat Manarino in straight sets. So you can argue that based on the competition so far, that Fritz has faced off against better competition, beating Rublev and beating Leheshka, and even Diallo can be dangerous in Canada especially. Diallo really didn't have anything going for him. It felt like Fritz was kind of dominant the entire matchup. So Diallo just didn't have it, but either way, it was a pretty difficult 3 matches in a row on hard court for Fritz. For Shelton, Dimonauer's tough, I'll admit it. Kaboli, I think you could argue, is a pretty streaky player, and that could be a little bit tricky, but I think that Leheshka, with the speed of these courts, is probably a tougher opponent if I had to compare it. Nakashima can be tricky. I think that Nakashima is a worse version of Shelton. A good serve, okay forehand, but not exactly the best rallier around. So I'd argue Fritz has faced off against better competition. Having said that, we saw Leheshka win a set against Fritz, almost win the match, solely with a serve, because nobody broke anybody. And the fact is, Leheshka, I believe, went 0 for 9 on breakpoint chances, and Fritz was 0 for 5. So Leheshka was returning well against Fritz. The question is, do I think Shelton can find a break in this matchup? Because one break might be enough to win a set, simply put. I think he can. I think Shelton is proven. I know that he no-showed the match against Fakina in the semis in DC last week. But I see a close matchup. I think 25 and a half games sounds right. You're looking at what could be a matchup like the Leheshka one with no breaks, maybe get some breakers involved. But I will pick Shelton to win a set. He served very well against Dimenauer. I think that he can serve well against Fritz. Fritz is a decent returner. I say that Fritz can have moments, but for the most part, both guys, Shelton and Fritz, can leave a lot of meat on the bone when it comes to returning. And I can see a breaker unfolding here. I think that Shelton, though, is a very good tiebreak player, and it's been proven over the years. So I actually think Shelton's alive to win this. I think Shelton has been a very solid player here. I think Fritz, it makes sense conceptually that he's favored to win the matchup. Do I want to lay 165? Not really. I'm not interested in the price. I think it's Shelton or pass. I don't see much separating these two guys because you're not going to see many breaks in the match as a whole. So based on that, you're looking at what should be a couple of breakers in there, most likely. And at that point, I'm flipping a coin, basically. I'll take the plus money. I think Fritz should be favored, but I do think 165 feels massive. I'd have Fritz to like minus 130, minus 135. 165 feels very large. I'll go Fritz once again to maybe win the match, but at that price, I can't take it. It's Shelton or pass. Give me the over for this one as well. You can get the over if it ends up going to a straight set war with two separate breakers or a 7-6, 7-5. You can get 24.5 minus 125. So once again, you can find some different options. 23.5 is minus 129. I don't hate that at 129. I'd go with the over on that. But with the projected tie breaks in this matchup, I think you're looking at what should be a war between two very good servers. I see a close battle. Give me Shelton in a war, but I do think that the over half a breaker at minus 190 kind of sums it all up. You're going to find one competitive set minimum. Maybe it goes three, but I do think the over is appealing. I do think Shelton has some value, and I do think that Fritz is too big of a favorite based on price. I get why he's favored, but there's no value based on that price to me. Give me Shelton for the plus 130 and change. It's going to wrap it up, though, for the actual breakdown of the Toronto semifinal matchups taking place on Wednesday. Time to move on into the lock and dog picks. Before getting into the lock and dog, a reminder, they're brought to you by our sponsor, which is once again Circa. They're still hosting three of the biggest football contests for the NFL season. They have Circa Million, Circa Survivor, and Circa Grandissimo. Over 21 million guaranteed prizes. You can't collect for 2 DGen. You're not competing in the contest. Hang out with SGPN at Circa for the contest weekend from the 21st, 23rd in August. For an amazing weekend, including live shows and open bars. Plus, you get 15% off your stay at Circa with the code SGP15. And a reminder that you can also enter the contest from anywhere. It's open to everyone. You have to sign up in Nevada. You can play from anywhere with the help of SGPN's official proxy at footballcontest.com. Use code SGP to get $50 off your proxy fees. We're also brought by Rhythm because they power trends, the best what the house model has to offer, and they've been really good for MLB and for WNBA. For MLB, the under on batter hitter props, for example, are hitting at a 70% rate. So fading players are quite profitable. WNBA, though, has been amazing. Since the All-Star break, it is 27-16. I actually backed some power trends today. 5-1 on the power trends. So I am very pro power trends for WNBA. I've made a lot of money blindly backing the power trends over the last month or so. But a reminder, you download Rhythm, check out the app, use the power trends, start betting smarter. And there's also a free trial for a week with SGPN. If you use the link, sportscamppockets.com Rhythm to get your 7-day free trial. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the preview of the matchups in the semis for Toronto. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. For the lock, I'm going to go back to that Shelton matchup against Fritz, and I am going to go with an over in this matchup. But Shelton's about minus 250 to win a set, and I'm going to play it safe because I think Shelton can actually win this. Give me Shelton team total over 12.5 at minus 136. So if Shelton loses in straight sets, you lose automatically. However, if he wins a set, you're blindly in very good shape because tiebreaker's minus 190. Both guys serve bombs, and Shelton, we saw in Indian Wells, even when he was kind of still very young, was able to go into Fritz's backyard in California and still win a set. I do think that Shelton will not go home empty-handed, win or lose. I think he wins a set minimum. He's minus 250 to win a set. There have been a bunch of long sets with each of them individually for the recent schedule. There's been a 7-5 or 7-6 set in 4 of Shelton's last 6 matches, and there's been a 7-5 or 7-6 in 5 of Fritz's last 6. So once again, you've seen a lot of 7-5s or 7-6s, which makes sense because both guys are great servers. I don't see many breaks in this one. I think Shelton is a very good tiebreak player, and I do think he can find a way to, at worst case scenario, steal a set. If he wins a set, I think it's a great deal. You can argue, I know that Shelton, in theory, could win handily, like 6-4, 6-4. I don't see it. I think that Fritz is a good enough server to force a breaker and to hold 5 times in a row. So with that being the case, I think there's a couple ways to get there, but you're looking at Shelton to win a set of minus 250. And I'm kind of suggesting that this is an alternative play, which is kind of the same thing. And you're saving about $1.14. I think it's a great deal. And the fact is, you're looking at the only head-to-head meeting not ending in straight sets. Shelton lost the match in 3, but he still went over the team total. I like the price. Give me Shelton to not get embarrassed by Fritz. Think he wins a set here. Give me Shelton team total over 12.5 games, minus 136 as my lock for the show. For the dog, gonna go with a basic play. Give me Zverev in straight sets at plus 112. Kashanov's beaten nobody in the event. Beat Mickelson, who I don't think is very good. Mentioned many times on the show. Rude, who is coming back from injury, who has not been a great hardcore player over the years anyway. I know he made the U.S. Open final during, I believe it was COVID, but either way, point is he's not really been a great hardcore player anyway. Coming back from injury, not going to read too much into it, as you ended up seeing Kashanov being the favorite in that matchup. Beat Nava, who I think is an okay hardcore player, not great. Fikovic, who's not any good on hardcourt. So Kashanov's had a pretty easy road so far. Zverev, though, beat defending champion. Mapiron beats Cerundolo, who I know got injured, but still, he can be dangerous at times too. Arnaldi can be tricky on hardcourt as well. And Walton could also be a bit tricky on hardcourt. So I like the path that Zverev's had a bit more. Think it's a bit more battle-tested, and I see Kashanov, who once again I thought didn't look good against Mickelson. I see a good spot for Zverev to win comfortably, and I do think that Zverev's head-to-head dominance does suggest a bad matchup for Kashanov. He's 5-2 lifetime. He's won 3 straight in straight sets. Faced up 2 times last year on hardcourt. Kashanov won less than 5 games in all 4 sets. I see a bad matchup. I like the plus money. Give me Zverev in straight sets as my dog for the show. So once again, the plays here for Toronto. I'm going to go with the lock being Shelton. Team total over 12.5 games of minus 136. For the dog, I'm going to go with Zverev in straight sets at plus 112. It's going to wrap it up for the show. Like once again, for the final in Toronto. Till next time, I'm on Twitter Radio. Good luck to all of you and all of your